Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Women Making Big Sales. Today, we're going to be talking to Stacy Eads. She was named 50 Women Making a Difference 3 years in a row. Well known as the most admired CEO, she now helps other CEOs to embrace their leadership potential. As a CEO coach, she coaches companies and CEOs that are mostly mid-sized corporations with $5 million to $250 million in revenue. I cannot wait to speak with her to ask her about her entrepreneurial journey and how she started to become or how she became the tech CEO and then how she transitioned to being an entrepreneur. Hey, Stacy, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Wonderful. So, before we get into the specific tactics and questions, all the questions I have for you, first of all, can you just share with us how you became a tech CEO, how that, the story, and then why you decided to transition from being a CEO to a coach?
Yes, absolutely. To me, it's a really fun journey. The story really begins with me being a salesperson. I was hired as an account executive for a technology company, and in that first 365 days, I sold 300% more than they had ever sold before. So immediately I was moved into the operations manager role because we then needed to hire a lot more contractors and staff and build out the capabilities of everything that I had just sold. So it was a really neat journey where I went from sales to the operations director. And by year 3, I had, as operations director, brought on some more services, some more product lines, and done some strategic moves that allowed me to become the CEO at that point. It was really exciting, and I ended up being the CEO for that company for about a decade here in Oklahoma. And it was a wonderful journey as a woman in tech.
That is amazing. So you started off as a salesperson. I find that extremely inspiring because I always find that being a sales can be such an important aspect of business because you're in front of your ideal clients. When you talk to them, you get that direct feedback of your service or your company so that you can continue to improve. What back then when you were a salesperson, what was the sales strategy that worked best for you?
I had a rule that I didn't want to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner alone ever. So I made sure that networking was top of mind 24/7. If there was any kind of a chamber to join in the Oklahoma City metro area, there's actually several chambers rather than just one, then we were involved in it. It was the Better Business Bureau, anything and everything that we could do to be able to be in the community, to be engaged and meeting new people. That really was the sales strategy. That first year, when I sold that 300% more in those 365 days, 100% of that was networking driven. I didn't have any kind of advertising budget. There wasn't any form of social media or Google ads or anything related to that. It was 100% face to face, shaking hands and kissing babies, as they say.
I love that. Networking. A lot of times when women entrepreneurs, we go to a networking event and then, there's so many people and they seem to know each other. And especially when you're just started out, it can be intimidating seeing that, hey, people seem to know each other and you seem to be outsider. And even when you start to create that connections, a lot of times we would ask ourselves, how do I transition from acquaintances, even friends, to that business conversations or sales conversations? Can you just take us through how you start to develop relationships and then how you transition to sales conversations?
Absolutely. One of the first things that I really like to train and teach people is that nobody puts baby in the corner, right? Like from the movie, we don't ever want to just walk into a networking event and slap a label on our chest that says, "Hi, I'm Stacy, I'm an introvert," or, "Hi, I'm Melinda, I'm an extrovert." We don't ever want to put ourselves in a box. And when we walk into a networking event, sometimes those little mental doubts are creeping in, right? We think, well, I'm shy, or I'm new, or I've never been here before, or I don't know anybody. And you got to leave all of that at the door and walk in with confidence. And I like to tell, especially introverts, because most people don't expect, but that's what I am. I'm an introvert. I can be a keynote speaker and stand on a stage with a microphone. I can walk into a networking event and work the room, but there is situations in which I have learned to be a situational extrovert. And then I can go recharge in my truck when I'm driving home with absolutely no radio and silence, and I can get that introvert state back to balance for me. So when you're walking into a networking event, I like to say, make sure you have the confidence. You're not walking in with any kind of, mental head trash.
Mhm.
And as you're working that room, think about the body language of what's happening in that setting. So a lot of us actually set ourselves up, and we don't set ourselves up for success. Rather, we kind of accidentally set ourselves up for failure. When you're new to networking, you might walk up to a group of 5 people. Those 5 people, they're in kind of an enclosed circle. All of their hips and their shoulders and their toes and their eyes are pointed inward towards each other. So that's not where you want to start, because it's hard for you to get a word in edgewise, to make eye contact, or to smile, or to get invited into that group. You don't ever want to be at a networking event where you feel like a pinball at an arcade, just bouncing from circle to circle, right? Like never
Mhm.
quite getting in. So make sure that you're looking for smaller groups, maybe of 3, because 3 people, there's always an odd man or an odd woman out, right? There's an odd person who isn't involved in the conversation, who can look up and make eye contact with you and wave you in or have a conversation with you. So there's really some body language that people could learn that helps them a lot with networking.
That is such a great tip. And then when you start developing relationships, do you have your favorite lines or favorite tips and strategy you use to kind of transition to a sales conversation?
I do. Never try to make the sale in the room. If you walk into a chamber event and there's 50 to 100 people, there's kind of a roar of the crowd, right? There's like energy level in that room. And you don't want to kill the energy, because really, when you're there to make introductions, to try to find quality connections, somebody that you genuinely connect with, can have maybe a 3 to 5 minute conversation with, and that's going to be memorable to them tomorrow. What you don't want to do is walk over to somebody and pull out your folder and your trifold brochure and start to make a 10-minute pitch while you're sitting right there, right? I
Exactly.
mean, they're holding a wine glass, they're holding a cheese platter, they don't have anywhere to put your stuff, and they feel boxed in, they feel cornered. So, all your goal is in that room is to make quality connections, not quantity. And that when you leave there with maybe 2 business cards that you genuinely think you had a good connection with, then you want to follow up, because networking has the word work in it. There is some follow up work, and that's how you start to build those relationships. So I like to reach out to that person and email them, and I use the power of or. If you haven't heard of the power of or, for me, that's sending them an email and saying, Melinda, it was so great to meet you at the chamber event last night. I really enjoyed talking about your family. I hope that you had a great dinner later that evening. I would love to know more about you and your business. I could come by your office Tuesday at 9 a.m., or we could meet at this cool cat coffee shop Thursday at 2 p.m. Which works best for you? So you assume the sale, you offer 2 choices of dates, times, and places, because that power of or will increase your response rate. More people will reply to you because it's easy to scan that email, check their calendar, and reply immediately. You don't want to have an open ended question. Melinda, it was so great to meet you last night. Would you like to meet with me? When would be good for you? That's killing the conversation. That's making it harder for Melinda to reply, and you could make it so much easier for her to reply.
That is a great tip. And I also love the strategy or tip you're sharing with us that you might get only two important relationships. A lot of times people think, okay, I'm going to this networking event. It's going to be filled with hundreds of my ideal clients. That means that I must be able to get 50 business cards, 30 connections. And then after the event, they are feeling or might be feeling a bit defeated, not having that much connections. But the reality, like you said, networking takes time, and sometimes it takes that those two real, meaningful business connections. So I love the fact that you kind of start to set the tone and share with people that it took you a while to kind of position yourself as the authority in your community, right? It did not start, it did not take only one or two events. How long did it take you for to start position yourself or to get known within your community?
You are correct. It takes time. So I would go to those networking events, and then afterwards, those two quality connections, sending that email, trying to get that power of or and that assume the sale that they want to meet with me, right? Then I might have a lot of Starbucks meetings or a lot of Panera Bread or a lot of lunches, whatever the case might be. That's where the work comes in listening to them, in engaging with them, asking them quality questions to learn about what they're passionate about and why they've been in that industry and how they chose to come there. And really, when you're focused on them, not on you, that's how you're going to build your brand in your community. And people are going to know that you're great at networking, that you're a wonderful person for them to introduce to others, because that's the key. You're not looking for the sale. You're looking for the referrals, the connections, and opportunity. If it just so happens that the person you're having lunch with has a need, then maybe there's that sale. But in all honesty, what you're looking for is to build connectivity. And every one person has at least 350 connections in their network: friends, family, coworkers, people they're connected with on LinkedIn. So I'm never looking for the sale at that lunch. I'm never looking for them to pitch and buy from me. I'm trying to make sure that we make a quality connection with each other, build that relationship so that they would feel comfortable opening up that connection to those 350 people they know.
Do you have a special strategy you use to ask for referrals or ask for business introductions?
Generally, I just customize it to who that person is and kind of what that conversation might have been like. I usually start by asking them again, what can I do for you? And I might even say a subtle suggestion of, it's been so great to have lunch with you today. I just want to be sure that in the follow up that I'm able to do what I can to help you succeed. Do you have any ideas? Is there anything on your mind that I could do to help you? I mean, for example, do you need a LinkedIn recommendation right now? Or, do you need a Facebook review? Is there something that I could do to help you now that I've gotten to know you and your products and your services? So typically, if you ask them, they're always willing to do that, right? And then it's kind of just human nature and it's reciprocal that if you did it for them, that probably better than 50% of the time, they're going to end up doing it back for you as well.
That is amazing. There are so many tips. I might steal some of the lines you just mentioned for my next networking event. So that was back when you were the CEO of a tech company. So you were selling for the company, you represented a company. And then afterwards, you decided to set up your own shop. You decided to become a coach. Can you share with me that journey, that transition? And then how you were able to get your first set of business through this transition, first set of clients through that transition.
Yes, absolutely. So I was the CEO of the company, but I wasn't the original entrepreneur who had created it, right? And so at a certain level, a decade later, and I'd really been in technology for about 21 years, I started to think, what's next for me? I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You know, that quote that everybody loves, right? So, what is next in my journey where I get outside of my comfort zone and I feel uncomfortable and I start to grow and learn new things? And I really looked at the fact that I had used this book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, and I DIY'd all those worksheets, all those tools as a CEO to grow that company. So in the end, basically, I quit counting at about 600% growth.
Wow.
So it worked so well that I started to realize, well, what would it be like to flip the script? And instead of being a client of the scaling up workshops and the scaling up book, what about being a coach of this system and being able to help more people than just my industry? I think that that would really ignite my passion and make me have that spark again. So I thought about it for a little while and I started to realize, okay, there's two things happening here. The first is that I started to do a lot of keynote speaking, trainings, lunch and learns, and I took a look at my calendar. And whatever you spend time on is what you're actually passionate about. I had 36 speeches planned that year. Granted, that's in 52 weeks. So, quite clearly, I was passionate about speaking and training and teaching people. The second thing that happened was that I kept noticing that at my lunches and at my breakfast meetings, people were asking me to lunch. They were asking me to breakfast. I was no longer asking them, right? And at those sessions, they would start to say, well, do you mentor? Would you be able to coach me in this situation? Would you be able to look at my resume? Would you help me with this? And so while they were using the word mentor, I started to notice, okay, I could be a coach. This could work out great. So it was risky for me. And I stepped into that and became an entrepreneur and became a full time coach and left that cushy CEO life because I just wanted something more. I wanted something that was about my growth and I wanted to be challenged.
Wow. So what a journey. And then when you transitioned, you were known as the tech CEO and then now you became the coach. What was it like to get that first set of clients? Did you wonder how am I going to get the clients or did you decide to go back to networking events just like the way you did and start connecting with people and then start telling people about your new journey?
Of course I was worried. Of course I was nervous. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be nervous from walking away from, a salary-based position into being an entrepreneur, fully commissioned based, pull it up by your bootstraps and make it happen. Of course, you're definitely nervous in that situation. The very first step that I did was to create my branding. So because I'd been in the marketing and website world, that part was a little easy for me to have the logo, the headshots, the business card, the website. All that stuff came together for me within a week. So the first time that I posted just on my personal social media page, hey, friends and family, this is what I'm doing, that's how I got my first client. I had been in a networking group with a woman who had been impressed with me at that time. When I was the CEO of a technology company, she was the CEO of another company. We were in that networking group on a regular basis. And so she got to see my integrity and intelligence. And for whatever reason, she remembered me. And we happened to be Facebook friends. And I got that first call that said, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how much it costs, but you're going to go have lunch with me this week because I'm ready to buy.
What a great yeah, what a great news. And then what happened afterwards? You just closed deal like that?
Yes, we did. So I actually met with her before I had even written, what does my proposal look like? What do my prices look like? What kind of packages do I have and don't I have? I had expected that process to take some time. And so I did something custom for her and did a consulting item and got that under my belt. And then somebody else said, well, hey, your technology background, you used to train and teach people about SEO, about search engine optimization. Would you be willing to be my consultant? Teach me about it. Then the next person talked to me about teaching them social media. So I started with teaching people the things that I knew because it's what they were asking for. So my first three customers were really more like consulting gigs, and it got my feet wet and it got my confidence up. And then after that point, I was ready to become the full scaling up coach and make sure that it was more about strategic planning and about how I could coach at the CEO to CEO level. But initially, you just got to do what works for you and what gets you out there.
And the what I heard was that because you had the connections, you were able to close sales a lot faster. If people want to try to get sales faster, it's all about building the reputation. I always tell people your reputation is so important. If you already have that reputation, the credibility and trust have already been established, then you are able to close sales a lot faster. But then fast forward, you had your three new brand new clients and they knew you, they trusted you, and you had that reputation. Eventually you have to build new leads and you had to connect with people that didn't know anything about you and probably knew you as a post CEO. You had the CEO position before, but now you're the CEO coach. What kind of sales strategies did you start using that really worked for you as you transition from the CEO for a tech company to a coach?
I made sure that I was challenging myself, that I was stepping outside of my comfort zone and stepping outside of my box, right? So, some of the networking events that I was going to in the past, they were great for what I did then.
Mhm.
And so that was B2B sales. You could sell to anybody in the company. It didn't have to necessarily be just C suite individuals in the room. But when I transitioned into being a CEO coach, I really needed to be able to get into different rooms and be in a different area. So there are things that you can look into. Entrepreneurs Organization, YPO, which is the Young Presidents Organization. Sometimes even, for example, our chamber that's here in my state happens to have a higher level that you pay a little bit more for, and you get into a board of advisor committee and into their rule. Everybody who's in that room happens to be a C suite. So I needed to challenge myself. I knew that networking would still work, but who am I networking with? And how do I get into the rooms that I really want to be in? Sometimes that's all about volunteering. For example, I volunteered my time for 3 years with a fundraising committee. And I did that because the people who were fundraising were the people who I thought were my ideal clients. So every time they were going to have rewards and celebrations and lunches and dinners, I was going to be invited to that if I too was a fundraiser in their community.
That's amazing. So, from what I hear, you also transition from the local networking events to more global scales. It seemed like you were doing a lot more local networking events, and now the reach you had is actually expanding. Does that, yeah.
Yes. So that really came about due to COVID. I mean, obviously, there are not a lot of positive things that happened due to COVID, but I can look at the bright side and understand that when that shift happened, and there weren't a lot of local events for me to show up and shake hands and be able to meet people in the way that I've been used to for 20 plus years, that's when Zoom happened. And I got comfortable with it fast. Obviously, being a woman in tech, that wasn't an issue for me. But when the Scaling Up Coaches organization, it's a global organization. There's about 150 to 170 coaches that are on several different continents. So when they decided to embrace Zoom and partner with the EO and the YPO chapters and groups, I again did that volunteer thing and I raised my hand and said, "Hey, this has been great. You've really helped us transition. We're meeting a lot of CEOs and I'm getting outside of my zone. I'm meeting people in California and New York and Nepal and Costa Rica. And this is really opening my eyes as to what my potential and what my global potential could be as a coach. If you ever need help, let me know. I'm here. I'm willing to volunteer." And by raising my hand and speaking up, That's exactly what happened. They wanted help. And so I became the partnership coordinator, and I now coordinate all of those events globally.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly what expanded my reach, was that moment where things changed from being local to being global. For me, it happened to be a pandemic that created that need, and I ran with it.
That's amazing. From what I hear, you're constantly looking for opportunities and you're able to find opportunities for networking events and to find more amazing people. You are a CEO coach. And I believe that you support CEOs and help them measure their results and strategies. But when we as entrepreneurs and we're evaluating our sales activities, do you have any tips or strategies that you would recommend to ladies, to women that are listening to? How do you evaluate the activities you do in sales? And what are the key KPIs? How do you use that kind of key performance indicator to evaluate your sales and your performance?
Yes, I talk to CEOs about this all the time. Whether you are the CEO of you, yourself, and you, or a very large corporation, you really do need to master the KPIs. And there's two buckets. And I feel like most people haven't necessarily heard about both of those buckets to make sure that they're tracking the right things. So, one of them is leading indicators. The other is lagging indicators. And most people who haven't had a chance to be educated about it, they're always picking lagging indicators. So they're picking something that's a profit and loss report, a line item like revenue, income, net profit, sales. But those are the final results that happen after a lot of other activity. So a leading indicator, something that would be better to track, is how many phone calls did you make? How many appointments did you set? How many proposals did you send? What were the dollar figures of those proposals and opportunities? Because that's the chain of events that'll get you to the lagging indicator, right? So I liken it to a car. If you're in a car and you're driving, you are looking forward. And when you're looking forward through that windshield, you're able to see a road sign that says maybe curve ahead or stop sign ahead. When you're using leading indicators, it's like you're driving the car and you're actually in control of the results. If you didn't make your 25 phone calls yesterday, then today you can make 50. You can look at that road sign and see how you need to adjust to the conditions. But if all you're ever using is the final result, total sales, then you're looking in the rearview mirror. You're looking behind you. It's already happened. And that's when you can get kind of emotional or upset about it or feel as though, you're getting down because something didn't happen. Well, you're only down about it because you can't do anything about it at that moment. If you'd work on the leading indicators, then you can shift and change every day, every week before the end of the month even occurs.
I also love the fact that when you talk about that leading indicator, they're all performance based rather than results driven because we have total control over our actions and our performance rather than the results. Like you said, the results, it could be a result of series of different activities. Absolutely love it. So you work a lot with C-suite executives, and most of the women in our community, we sell to C-suite executives. What's keeping them awake at night these days? What are their biggest concerns these days? Could you share with us, especially now you work so much with the CEOs?
There is a lot on a CEO's mind, right? If it's a small business or a large business, I've honestly found that the smaller the business is, the more weight, the more pressure is on that CEO. So there are things that are keeping them up at night. And the larger and larger companies, that CEO has already had a chance to develop a team around them, a C suite, a director of marketing, a CFO. They have other people to share that weight with.
Mhm.
So small CEOs versus large CEOs, they might have a little bit of some different pressure, some different ability to share the weight, but typically what they're thinking about kind of falls into about 4 decisions. We talk a lot as scaling up coaches about people, strategy, execution, or cash. Usually, if I talk to a CEO and I say, what's keeping you up at night? It's either people. Right now, there is a lot of individuals who are struggling with recruiting great talent or keeping talent or the balance of work from home versus coming back into the office. So, those are things that are on their mind. And strategy, that's really your roadmap. Where are you headed in 10 years, in 5 years? It's typically more long term thinking, right? So, during this pandemic, a lot of CEOs have been wondering, well, this shifted in my industry, but is it a short term shift and it's only because of the pandemic? Or is this going to be a long term trend that's going to continue? And I need to make some long term advanced decisions, right? So, people and hiring strategy, especially whether there's some short term or long term shifts, execution is always on a CEO's mind because they do believe they have great people and they do think that they have the right strategy. But if you can have the best people in the world and you can have the roadmap written down on paper, but people have to rise to execute. Every day, every week, every month, you have to execute on the plan. So that is actually always on a CEO's mind. Time management, time blocking, leadership skills, making sure that we can execute properly. That last one is cash. And that's always going to be different for every CEO. So some CEOs might be worried about sales. Others might be worried about cash flow, the literal rhythm of when does the cash come in and when does the cash go out? And do we have any gaps that we start to feel nervous about? And then other CEOs who might have larger corporations, they might be more concerned about controlling their cash and building a war chest. Because when it is hard times for other people, if they have the right amount of money, then they can go do mergers and acquisitions, they can buy out other products and services, and they can make some good strategic decisions. So overall, I tend to think that the CEOs, they can have a variety of issues and concerns, but they kind of fall into those 4 decisions of people, strategy, execution, or cash.
Wow, they definitely have a lot of things in mind. So that's the flip. This is usually my last questions for during the podcast. So if we flip our position, you were a CEO. So assuming, imagine somebody approaching you either on LinkedIn or on email and try to sell you a service, and they decided to reach out to you cold. They didn't know you at all. What kind of sales kind of style strategy that would make you more likely to respond to those messages?
I think the biggest thing that people can remember is that when I was a CEO, I was still a person just like you.
Yes.
Just because you have this title doesn't mean you're running around with this queen crown on your head. And I think as salespeople, sometimes we can get intimidated by a title, and you shouldn't. You should talk to them just like you're talking to everybody else. And that's the number one tip. So if you're trying to reach out to CEO, use their first name. There's no need for you to say Mrs. Eads. You can say Stacy, that'll be fine. And try to start a conversation. So you don't need to sell me right away. Whatever you would do at a normal networking event is what you should do in the inbox. You're not going to walk up to me at a networking event and say a 3 sentence paragraph and then attach a PDF, right? If you walked up to me at an event, you're going to start a conversation. Hi, how are you? How long have you been in business? You're going to ask some questions and get some engagement before you start to discuss the products, the services, and things like that. So I think it's similar. If people will put themselves in the mindset of how would I approach you at a party, then that might be how you want to approach in LinkedIn or in the inbox or that phone call that you're having, right? I had a really great presentation the other day. A gentleman named Jason was talking about cold calling, and he said he used it within medical references that if you're trying to get past the gatekeeper, you shouldn't call and say, is Dr. So-and-so available? You should say, is Stacy available? because they assume you know them and they put you through faster. And I thought that's the exact example that I'm talking about. Take away the doctor title, throw in a CEO title or a C-suite title, maybe you sell to CFOs or whatever the case is, and just realize that they're a person on the other end, and try to just open up an engaging question or conversation and lead into what you're wanting rather than just throwing the kitchen sink out right at the beginning.
Exactly. This is similar to how I would share with the women in this community. Always imagine yourself talking to a neighbor that just moved to your neighbor to next door. So you obviously want to start the conversation, asking them where they're from, why they decided to move. Start to build that initial conversations, and then eventually maybe invite them to a barbecue party, backyard party. But that is how you build relationship. You don't just straight right away ask them to become your best friend. So I absolutely love this, you sharing with us these tips when it comes to cold outreach and cold calling. So what this is pretty much one of the last questions I have. Do you like LinkedIn? Do you reach out to people on LinkedIn at all? How do you feel about LinkedIn these days?
I love LinkedIn, and I have gotten so many new connections in the last year and a half. Obviously, when things shifted from being so much in person for me and into that online world, if I go to a conference online and there's 50 people in that room, I'm happy to actually cold reach out via LinkedIn, and I'll connect. And when connecting, I'll be sure that I add a note so that they know who I am. And I'll say, it was great to hear from such and such speaker at ABC event. What was your biggest takeaway? And I'll press send, because I'm inviting them to connect with me. I'm telling them I was on the same conference that they were, even though we never spoke to each other. And then I'm inviting a conversation so that they have a reason to reply. If every time you send something, you end with a period rather than a question mark, what is the prompt for them to reply?
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, thank you so much, Stacy, for coming over and sharing so many tips with us. If people want to connect with you, do you have specific resource you want to share with people, and how the best way to connect with you after this interview?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously LinkedIn, I love it.
Yay!
I will connect with anybody who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. So they can just look up Stacy Eads. It's Stacy, and then the last name is Eads. So if they want to connect with me there, you're welcome to ask me for some free resources whenever you connect on LinkedIn. For example, if you've never read that Scaling Up book that I talk about, I actually have an 8-page recap. It's kind of like the Cliff Notes version, right? Like down and dirty, like get to the point here. And I'm happy to send that to you. Just reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. Ask that you want to be able to learn more about the Scaling Up book, and I can send that over your way. Happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for coming up and sharing your insights. I'll also make sure to share your LinkedIn address with everybody. So whoever wants to connect with Stacy, go ahead, click on the LinkedIn link so that you can connect with Stacy directly. Thank you.
Thank you.